On to talking about
Yeah,
some
let's get
films.
into it.
I think that'll be fun. Talk about Joyland. Yeah, I watched this like about a week ago, and it's I will start it off like right off the bat. It like worked for me for sure. I think it was like I was almost thankful that this film was suggested because it aligns so much with like a lot of different like things I like in a film, like sensibility
Mm.
wise. I think like
Mm,
cinematically, like there's kind of like an architectural quality to the way the camera is like situated in the film, right? It's kind of like I don't know. I feel like there's like an angularity to a lot of the shots that like I really liked.
mm,
Um,
mm,
and in the film, like tippy toes, like the perfect line of wanting to say something political but does not try to like shove it down your throat. I think the
mm,
last scene, like the my one qualm about this film, like my one small qualm is like I did think it was a little bit moralistic at the end after Momta died, and then like
mm.
the mom and the dad and then the son are like talking about like, oh, I killed Momta, or like, no, you killed Momta. Like I think that part felt a little bit contrived. Um,
Yeah,
but I'll start there, and I think it was like, and Jackson, you've recommended this film because did you say it's because you knew the director or?
I have not met the director,
Uh-huh.
but I am 1 degree removed, maybe because he's currently in the Columbia MFA program, finishing as like a
Oh,
director.
oh,
And
he's still enrolled there.
yeah, he's not even done. I think he's got like a year or two left. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, tell him it was a like. I think
Yeah,
it
if I
was like this
if I
feeling of
meet him.
like it was a feeling of like I think when I watched it, I was like, wow, this person like really studied film. Like I feel like this
Oh yeah.
person really like studied it. I think that's kind of like the feeling I got, right?
Mm.
Yeah. I guess I'll start there and then kind of love to hear like how you guys
Yeah. I
approached
like your
it.
comment about the like architectural feeling of it. I mean, I think one of my first notes about it, I mean, the first thing I feel,
Mm,
I mean, you notice, I mean, from the very first shot, like chosen aspect ratio and like the frame of the film is
mm,
a square, you know? It's like
mm,
almost, and I was trying to like reason this for a while because it's such an intentional choice. It's so
mm,
like contrary to kind of convention that you see nowadays in most movies and are not like kind of framed that way. Um, but there is a certain kind of like perpendicularity to a lot of these shots. I really love that scene. Um, it's that morning after Fayaz, the lady, the widowed lady, stays over with them, and they're all sitting around in the morning, and they've all kind of like learned something
mm,
about another person. Like Salim, the brother, has caught Mumtaz like watching the guy in the alley, and
mm,
Nucci is like, I don't think it's ever explicitly stated, but there's that moment where Nucci like is looking at her phone, Salim's wife, and she's presumably seeing Haider like the dance video and like
mm,
discovering like what he actually does for a job, but like no one will say anything. And then in this moment, the very first like couple of shots of this scene in the morning where they're like getting yelled at by this widow's son, um, everyone's kind of glancing back and forth at each other, but everyone is framed like kind of straight on. It's almost like there's this like portrait of this person in their little, it's like almost like this, we're sitting in our little Zoom bubbles.
yeah.
Um, but everyone almost feels like in those moments, like almost kind of enclosed, like caged almost in
Mm,
their knowledge or in their situation in general. I think Mumtaz feels very, very trapped in a very overt way, but I think like Haider is very bound by a lot of these kinds of things too. I think like yeah, being bound or kept or held is a very there's a very pertinent like visual quality of like being bound or
yeah.
constrained in a certain way in this film.
Yeah, yeah. no, I think that's there is like a consistency in, yeah, I think what the characters feel and how that's portrayed on screen in like a visual way.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, what about you, Youngguang?
Um, I think this was very, very, very impressive, especially for such an early effort.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and this is more of like taking your points as an analogy, but you guys have been talking about perpendicularity for the architecture of the film, and I think you can kind of feel a similar kind of working in the narrative. And this
Mhm.
kind of goes back to what Andrew said about sort of how it approaches its politics. It's I think it's always a great time when it's very hard when you immediately get the intuition that the film is talking about something very political, very um, hot to touch, yet at the same time it's very hard to summarize what it's actually trying to say in a few sentences.
Mhm.
Um, Sort of its treatment of the place of trans people, its play of sort of the lives of trans people, patriarchs, old people, um, straight men, straight women, all within this single, patriarchal ecosystem. Like at once you can kind of just see like, the different balls on the pool table move around of its own
Mhm.
accord. It's you're kind of observing like the physics of it all. The physics of all these personalities and all these different identities like clashing, yet at the same time, and you see some of them fall off the table. You see some of them, in pain. You see some of them um, come together for brief, tender moments throughout the film. Yet nothing really amounts to anything. And
Mhm.
that appeals like some a quality that's really true to life in a lot of the sort of the best naturalistic, well-observed films that we usually celebrate, and which is actually kind of quite rare nowadays, I think. Um, kind of a diet, kind of a maybe a passe kind of film making for a lot of people. Um, but it was so pleasurable to me. Like it's like this really pleasurable sense of like it not landing in any like dramatically easy or like dramatically like
Yeah.
browbeating kind of destination. Um, Not to mention like that you don't feel a kind of like you don't feel confirmed in your ideas so much as you just feel sort of awash in kind of
Mhm.
the sort of the ambient sadness of the situation, you know.
Yeah. Mhm.
Um, and that's always a feeling, which and it always reflects kind of the ambient sadness of perhaps living in situations like that, and
Yeah.
any kind of analogous situations that we might find ourselves in. And just to echo Andrew's point, I do kind of feel that some of the ending dialogue was a little bit pat. I
Mhm.
would if I had a criticism, it would sort of be like the last image of him watch, sort of swimming away into the horizon. It is an ambiguous ending, and in a
Mhm.
sense, it is very much in tune with the rest of the film.
Mhm.
But if this makes any sense, it feels kind of like a typical ambiguous image,
Mhm.
Yeah,
Mhm.
just
I was
yeah,
not, yeah, I
yeah,
was not very surprised that he
yeah,
made it to
yeah,
the beach by the end. I might have
yeah,
even
yeah,
like
that's a good
said it
point.
out
Yeah,
loud, like when he's in the
yeah,
station, I'm like, was he
yeah,
going to the beach? Like,
yeah. It's
yeah.
an ambiguous ending that like unambiguously communicates ambiguity. It's
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
unambiguously indicating that the point is ambiguity. Yeah.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Oh,
And
that's
maybe I think I wish it was an image. It didn't have to be a piece of
yeah,
dialogue. Maybe it was an image that was much more entangled with the rest of the movie. The cityscape,
true.
the literal architecture, the
Mhm.
people, the society. Yeah,
Mhm.
but other than that, it's a mightily impressive work,
Yeah.
And
especially for someone so young.
that's a good point too, because it's like I think the part about this film that I really enjoyed, and I think what I enjoy in films, in like films in general, like what I like in films is like that kind of open-endedness of like an ending. And then not like films that don't desperately try to like tie up loose ends and just leave them as it is. Like naturalistic films, I think I always tend to like really like walk away feeling like there's something that I'm like chewing on. Um, and but I think looking in hindsight, when I like look back, I feel like I also have realized that the kind of open-ended and ambiguous films I've enjoyed and have liked are
Mhm.
like ones that are like what you said, like unambiguously ambiguous or like communicates ambiguity as
Mhm.
like communicates ambiguity as a form of a very legitimate ending, right?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
and I think this, I mean, so for me, I liked kind of that like beach, like walking into the beach ending, whatever, because it's a form that I feel familiar to. Like it's like, oh, like
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
this is gonna be an
Mm-mm,
ambiguous ending,
mm-mm,
right? Um,
mm-mm.
but I think that's a good point. Like maybe it is like I need to challenge my own assumptions of like, do I like this film because it is truly like leaving it up to like the viewers, or do I like it because like it is a familiar sequence of like,
Yeah, like it
you know,
knows that beat from somewhere else and is playing
it,
it well, but like is from somewhere else,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah. It's like there's so many images that I can think of where like it has to do with like decision to leave or or
Mm-mm.
um
Oh, that's
like
true.
yeah like and there's like I was like I've like seen it and then I think for me I like think of it as like oh like this is a good movie because it is ambiguous, but is it like it's I guess it's also like the director's intention too, right? I
Mhm.
think I like that point about what Young Won said. It's like, yeah, I do wish like now that I think about it, like the ending felt a little bit more interrelated and a little bit more entrenched in like what I watched in the film because the yeah, like the beach part doesn't really come up in like the movies, right? Like it's not like the
Yeah.
Um,
main
it's like mentioned very briefly, right? Like he talks about
uh
it with Biba first and then brings it up to Mumtaz as well.
Oh, that's true. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, that's true.
yeah.
Like I've never been because he's never seen the ocean, right? He like asks her what it's like, and she's like, it's big, like it's
Oh,
the
Golden
ocean.
Beach, Golden Beach. Yeah, right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
yeah,
right.
yeah.
Yeah,
yeah,
Golden.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
you're right. Now that I actually, yeah. In that case, it is like there's like a linearity, but it's also
Yeah,
like dang, like it's like I think it's also kind of this feeling of like yeah, like the film like needed like this expansive image to end it on, right?
yeah. I mean, I did. So yeah, I have like a meta thought about that a little bit, but um,
Mm.
I do think the expansiveness or like go. I mean, literally expanding the frame as you end it, right?
Mhm.
Like coming further and further away, higher and higher
Yeah.
up. Um, but having it tie into like how much larger I think the world is like this is a story very specifically grounded in some ways in a lot of like traditional Pakistani values and like in a
Mhm.
Mm.
traditional household and it's more in like city and a specific culture, but like the things that happen in this movie, like the things that everyone in this movie goes through are things that you find everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
From like, you know, the really overt, like kind of difficulties of like being a trans woman and like, you know, like the prejudice that
Hmm.
Biba faces, but then also like, you know, this like agitation or like with domesticity. I mean, it's really funny actually that we saw this in Next to Kramer versus Kramer is a lot of women just being
Mm.
agitated in their
Yeah.
marriages and being really like like deeply unhappy.
Yeah.
Uh,
Hmm.
but I thought it was really interesting. Maybe two things really interested me about what you guys were saying. First, a cohort of mine from Columbia, actually, in the MA program, did her thesis on waves and oceans in queer cinema and kind of did this big
Mm.
analysis and
What were some
uses the
films that
ocean
she
kind of like a,
mentioned?
sorry?
What were some
Oh,
films that she mentioned?
main one I'm thinking of now is Call Me by Your Name.
Uh-huh.
True, true. Yeah, true.
But
Yeah.
there are a
Uh-huh.
lot of others. I
Like
think, oh,
Moonlight,
Portrait of
Moonlight,
the Lady on Fire is
Portrait of
very
the Lady.
ocean.
Yeah, that's true.
Um,
Yeah. I would say
there are a couple
Moonlight
others like
too.
this.
Yeah.
been a
Yeah,
while since I
Moonlight.
since I read it or saw the presentation, but there's a
Uh,
lot like this, and it has a lot in her mind, had a lot in her mind to do with like
yeah.
there's fertility in the ocean and in the waves. There's there's like a beauty, but it's like kind of an aggressive, dangerous beauty, and then there's also like I mean,
Mhm.
it's like a fluidity and like a non-conformism or something, kind of like a freedom almost to
Mhm.
these kinds of things, or like yeah, the
Mm-hmm.
whole kind of association that she develops with oceans and waves and queer identities, which I thought of as I mean, I literally texted her when I finished the movie. I was like, "You would love this movie. This is exactly wow." But then yeah, that relating also to kind of what um Youngblood was saying about like physics and like I feel like what I was experiencing here so much is like the kind of physics of like their interactions in a lot of ways, but also specifically like the physics of gender, but also like kind of the ironies, like in the
Mhm.
subversions, like
Mm-hmm.
that. I mean, the whole movie is so dedicated to just obliterating like every traditional notion of like gender that we have. It starts with Hyder dancing at this
Yeah,
erotic
yeah.
club,
Right,
these women
right.
and falling for her, and then them falling out because he has this kind of like flawed view or idea about her, and like
Mhm.
um where they get into that big fight and they don't really see each other anymore after that because he might be gay, I think is where they're kind of getting at with that. And then also um like you have Mumtaz at home after having left her job, but like doing like domestic wife stuff.
Mhm.
But the whole time, I mean, I think one of the first things you see her doing is like lifting that huge table down the stairs with her
Yeah,
sister,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and then like assembling that huge makeshift ice machine air conditioner, which is all this like really intensive physical labor and like really like kind of, I mean, perceptibly, like I think very evidently kind of masculine things we'd imagine to be masculine work,
Mhm.
which fit into this kind of like very neat idea of like a traditional like woman's gender role in the house or this kind of thing. But just that happens all throughout. I think the even like the father is experiencing kind of like this push and pull of like being
Yeah.
so emphatically in charge of everyone, and then also being like so extremely
Helpless.
helpless in
Yeah.
patriarchal positioning, like to the point where he literally like can't go to the bathroom by himself, and certain things
Yeah.
like this. Um, but appreciated that it's just like this film is like not afraid to imagine every other possible way of being, at least in like a gendered sense, I feel like in a lot of ways, which I thought was really interesting, or I really
Yeah.
appreciated.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think one last comment on this too is like this, I think specific scenes that I just thought was genius in like as a like a plot device or as a like just like a imagistic device. Like I think the scene where like Hader is like lugging back the what is it, like the
The
massive cardboard
cutout. I
cutout
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
love
of
yeah, yeah,
that
Eva,
yeah.
shot on the
and then
motorcycle.
yeah, yeah, and then having that just put up on the roof. It's
Yeah.
so like I'm like I think as if I like I was like, how do you think of having a scene like that, like which is able to show like this the bizarre nature of like what Hyder is doing and like where his feelings are headed, but not overtly say that it is, but still is
Mm-hmm.
able to somehow visually communicate that. I thought that scene like just it just worked perfectly for me. I was like, yeah, this is bizarre. This is weird. This is there's like a uncanniness to it. Um,
Mhm.
I think second for me was like I think it talks about for me like I also was curious to like hear figure curious to uh get a better understanding of the dad and his internal turmoils, like as somebody who's authoritarian but also aging. And the
Mm.
scene where he cannot roll his wheelchair up the little ledge and just ends up like peeing, and doesn't want the neighbor, like the widowed lady, to like come help him, but also doesn't want her to leave either. It's like there is like such a complication to his feelings too, but like I think that scene is able to like entirely communicate it with just
And
like
it is
his,
just that scene, isn't it? Like
yeah,
that's the
yeah,
first time you see into him at all, and you see the whole world almost.
yeah, yeah.
And then
It's
every
like
time
that
afterwards that you see him, you can't discard that anymore, I feel like either.
exactly. Like
Mm.
you can't unsee what you saw, and I was like, wow, that
Very
scene,
powerful.
yeah, it was like, I mean, it is like that's like what like a movie should do, like communicate feelings and emotions and thoughts just through like images and yeah, I thought I really, really liked those two scenes. Um,
Mhm.
well,
That is
Great
funny.
scenes.
Like
mhm,
realizing, yeah, that is such a like academically sound presentation of these ideas, right? In the scene
yeah,
like that, because it's so
yeah,
efficient, it's purposeful.
yeah,
It like his the way that I mean, you can yeah, it's like what you said. Like you can tell he's studied film very carefully
yeah.
and started
And
something
there's
like
so
that.
many more, like even like the part where like it's a hater that's leaning on Biba when they're like riding the motorcycle. It's like that communicates something that like I
Yeah,
think like if
she
if
drives
you
him
think,
everywhere.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. The scene where Mumtaz is like looking out into the window and seeing the man masturbating, and then she's also like, like masturbating by rubbing, herself against the table. It's like I don't know. And then I think that also communicates this like lust she feels as like a woman, but like can't fully own up to that because of this role of like kind of masculinity she plays in the household. Um, yeah,
There's
I
something
think
very Timing Wang about that moment, I feel like, especially the way she's caught and then they just stand there
just there.
silently and it
I
cuts
thought
away. So like,
I thought that was beautiful too because I think a typical movie would have had like
what
the
are you doing? You can't be
exactly,
doing that.
exactly. Yeah, 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 yeah. But
Mm.
they just lock eyes and then it just cuts to like the next scene where they're like, at the water fountain area and he just says like, hey, like you should, how are you and mom test doing? That there's a lot that's communicated by like cutting out and not communicating parts that typically I think movies are jumping to communicate.
Mm. Mm.
Yeah. So,
Um,
well, I know we're
yeah.
like running a little bit up on time, so let's jump to Kramer and Kramer and maybe have a quick discussion here. Um, for me, I think this was like the original Marriage Story.
Mhm.
Like it was like, um, yeah, what did you guys think?
There's a lot of, I mean, I said this earlier, but it's a lot of like fraught marriages and like
Yeah,
subverted gender roles this
yeah,
month.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
exactly.
um,
Um,
I thought it was great. I didn't realize how like I had that sense of like what the movie was about, but I hadn't like seen any clips of it or like really known
mhm.
the details of it. I didn't realize how much like that literally 95% of this movie was going to be Dustin Hoffman alone with the kid.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Dude,
Like
they probably didn't pay Meryl Streep or like Meryl Streep, like it's like, yeah, you just go
she's like
like,
basically as a cameo,
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
Like you go shoot a
character.
different movie and then we'll tell you when we need you.
Yeah,
yeah.
right.
I believe this was
Um,
a breakout role, in fact. Like this
Yeah,
was before Meryl Streep was Meryl Streep,
oh,
per se.
interesting. Yeah.
did
Yeah.
not know. But yeah, like that she's kind of not really all she's not very there very much at all, but also in a way that I don't think is lacking. Like
Yeah,
maybe this
yeah.
Yeah.
is like watching it in 2024 and having this kind of like, women's lib, as it is,
Hmm.
the
Mm.
way as they say in the movie. Um, like I feel like I as a viewer in 2024 understand Meryl Streep's character, like Joanna's character, very clearly, and like how that
Yeah.
happened, and, like where she would be coming from, even without knowing what she did in California, or like what her specific qualm was with the marriage, or like kind of not really seeing much of her perspective at all. And on the flip side, like was very like impressed and like refreshed even, and surprised, like pleasantly surprised by like the kindness with which it treats Dustin Hoffman's character in a certain way. I think you often
Yeah.
expect divorce stories that like the dad's kind of a deadbeat and like, kind of can't fix his man issues and this kind of thing, but that like
Mhm.
figures that out for himself, and that he you feel like he has a substantial case to like have custody of the kid as well, is really well
Yeah.
done.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I think it's
Um,
time well spent with each of them is what I would say, I guess.
and you kind of feel the specter of Meryl Streep or like Meryl Streep's character throughout the film. Like I think like her absence is in itself like a role that she is playing. Um,
Yeah.
but I mean, but just like for yeah, for like logistically, yeah, I think Meryl Streep won Best Supporting Actress. So you could, yeah, she wasn't like the main actress, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. What about you, Young?
Um, I mean, this is one of those movies that feels so alien now. An 8 million budget movie that makes $173 million in the box office sparks a conversation about, is that right? Yeah. Okay. It
Yeah.
sparks like a national conversation about like custody rights, about like men and women. For such a moderately and such a talky film
Yeah.
to have, like, engender that kind of influence in the cultural sphere, like
Hmm.
that seems like, I don't know, that seems like an alien artifact almost at this point in time. Um,
Hmm.
the film
Yeah, like
itself, I
that
mean,
kind of thing
it's
doesn't even emerge out of like something corollary like a marriage story now, right? Like we
exactly,
like
Yeah.
yeah, like Marriage Story nowadays is just considered like an indie film. This was like a mainstream hit,
Right,
and
right. Yeah.
ultimately they're not that too different in approaches. Um,
Hmm.
the film itself, elite scene chewing by by Dustin Hoffman,
Hmm.
one of the world's premier experts on being, like, on a scale of 1 to 10, beleaguered by the world at hand at around 8 and 9. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
like he's never at the breaking point, but he's like, chugging his way along towards it. Like
Yeah,
no one does it
yeah.
better than him.
Yeah.
He yeah, I believe Meryl Streep actually like felt like her character was like quote unquote too evil in the original script, and she actually
Mm.
convinced the filmmakers to change the script. Um, and thankfully, I think we can all agree for the better. Like
it's a great
there's
success.
like yeah, there's like a mutual kindness, Jackson, as you said, that like the movie slowly settles into. Um,
Hmm.
I think the closest thing to like an unlikable, unpleasant, evil character is like Meryl Streep's lawyer,
Hmm.
or at least the lawyers in general. Like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and that kind of, yeah, that kind of like crystallizes a very funny kind of movie where it's like the system and the law and these lawyers and these like snakes that are evil and that are separating us apart. But like, all these people that we live with like these irreconcilable but loving hearts, within
Mhm.
ourselves. And it's a very, very wholesome ending.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, no,
uh,
no, no ocean shots here. It's
no ocean shots here. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Yeah. We know what's up here.
Hmm.
uh,
Yeah.
yeah, like yeah, I feel like this is like a great film.
Yeah.
I just like a film I could watch with my parents.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. And I think for me, I think we talked a lot about sort of like the thematic content and the subject matter it's dealing with and how yeah, very unprecedented at the time for like a 1979 film to have a movie about woman reclaiming her womanhood, like
Mm,
in a marriage context. But I think like there was a phase in my life and still will say I love movies that take place in New York and it's like from like the 80s,
Mm,
like that kind of
mm,
like that nostalgic like retro quality. Like I mean, I'm it's like I can't like Annie Hall, like Manhattan, Ordinary People, um, yeah, like Ferris Bueller's Day Off. Like I think I like it's been a while since I've watched a movie that is so just like this movie's not indie, right? It is very much like a
yeah,
studio made, like very kind of like Halorian, like s sort of follows a certain formula, like
yeah,
type
yeah.
film, like a big production. It's the kind of film that I'm sure like Francois Truffaut like would have revolted against, right? It's a very like against like it's like quality cinema, right? But
Yeah, 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 yeah.
like there's comfort in it. And it's like, man, I love this kind of like very um like too well written dialogue. Like you know how like the dialogue is like too like it's like
Yeah,
too
yeah.
well written, right? Too oiled up. And like you
Mhm.
can tell that all of these sets are like very much like made for this movie. Like, but I don't know. I also was like, man, like it's
Yeah,
also just like a good time watching this movie too, right? Um,
yeah.
like I think there is like for me it was like, yeah, like movies, like I love like indie films, and I think I kind of like that like underdog, like bootstrapped attitude too. But I think I also do enjoy movies that are like well made, high production value, like films like such as this, right?
Mm,
So yeah, I mean it's definitely one of those movies where I'm like, man, like not only did I like the movie, but it's also I also like movies that take place in New York too. And it's like this movie very much is that, right? So
I do
mm,
love this kind of movie in a lot of ways.
yeah,
Um,
exactly, exactly.
I think
yeah.
the other thing, like dialogue on top of dialogue, is like I think what's really nice. One thing I really liked, or like, well, the part of the movie that had me like literally sitting up and cheering
Uh-huh.
was when Dustin Hoffman has to go out and get a new job.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
have a job in 24 hours. Ding. And he goes out, like locks the fuck in, basically. And I'm like,
Oh yeah.
that's my guy. Let's
Yeah,
Yeah.
go.
yeah.
Like something
That
very
yeah.
Oh
pleasurable to
man.
me about like someone like like genuinely good, competent characters, who
Yeah.
are like
Yeah,
what
yeah,
they do or what they want to do. Because then you feel like anything that happens to them, you know, it feels more intense that way. It's not like, oh, well, you deserve this. Like you had it
yeah.
coming.
Mhm.
You are
Yeah.
so, yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Adult movie starring adult people with adult problems, dealing them in adult ways.
this was,
Yeah.
oh, I don't know if I told you guys or if I had been last month when I saw, but I went to a talk at Asia Society with Celine Song. Um,
Mm,
Oh,
mm,
I don't know if I told
we
you last
passed.
month, but
Yeah. I don't think so.
she had a great point about this in the same way where it's like I didn't want to make a movie where it was like this kind of really pithy romance, people fighting, this kind of thing. This is maybe a bit of a tangent, but like that instead everyone's like being a mature adult, be doing the things that mature adults should do in every situation, different in the situations in that movie. And that's
Mm.
painful, but that's also real. And so it lets us really ache and believe in what happens
Yeah.
in that. That's something that kind of applies here too.
Yeah.
Like everyone,
mm, mm.
I understand why they would do it, and they actually are even quite successful with their choice to do things, whatever
Mhm.
they do.
Yeah. I think for me, like for like if I watched this like 10 years ago or whatever, and the scene where Dustin Hoffman's like taking a job that's like much less paying,
Hmm.
um, like I think at the time I was like, yo, what's the deal? Like you're still making money. Like just like why is that an issue? Like you just need a job, just do it. But like in the position I'm in now, like taking a pay cut when you don't have to, it's like it is it's a huge, I think something that does it's a bigger problem than I would have given it credit, right? I think it's like these
Yeah,
little things too where yeah, like it's like a real, it's not like this like too overly blown problem of like somebody having like this like cancer or like like some it's
yeah,
like
yeah.
these like minute problems of like taking a pay cut that it's things that any adult
Yes.
has to wrestle with, right? Yeah.
Sometimes you just fuck up the French toast, It's like
Yeah, yeah. And then he's like an expert at it by the end of it. I remember that scene also was very
that
like
scene is so good. That
it
second
was
time
really
when he's
poignant. Yeah. I was like,
quietly
I think
taking the French toast.
yeah, yeah, and he's like good at it. Whereas like in the beginning he's like burning his hand and shit, you know?
They
Yeah,
put it in
yeah,
the mug.
Yeah.
So nasty. His just hands are covered in
Yeah.
egg. Uh,
Any
yeah.
last thoughts here? I think before we can talk about
I do, but I
something you
want
like
to go
technical.
last.
Okay.
So if no one else has anything.
I think I'm
I
yours,
done.
also
yours,
Yeah.
I think.
point out that Joanna Kramer went to Smith. So, dude, we know
Oh,
what
yeah,
Oh
yeah.
yeah.
great.
What's
I
up?
re-
Her
Dude,
lover,
that
her
pie.
unnamed lover is a woman, Ted. This is the problem.
No.
Dude,
Five
I
colleges.
actually
Subtext.
I'm curious where Rob Denton went to school. Like, because
Mm.
to choose Smith, that's also a very deliberate uh
I know. No, that's
deliberate.
that's literally like that's a specific choice. Like
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
joking partially, but I'm also kind of not joking. Like
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually,
I
I
think
don't
the
know.
way she plays it even too, like I think if you watch that scene where she's talking about her lovers and her finding herself and like
Uh-huh.
where she's on the stand, like there's such easiest queer interpretation of my life in that.
Mm,
You like just it all lines up really, really almost too neatly.
yeah.
It's generic, but that
Yeah,
cracked me
yeah.
up when he said Smith. I was like, oh my gosh.
That's fun. Yeah. Gotta love that pioneer value representation. All right, let's talk about spotlight films. I also probably need to go start packing for,
Mhm.
for my flight later. Um, yeah, what um would love to yeah hear if there are any movie movie any because I know like last time like I chose a film, Jackson chose a film, so Young, if there's anything that you want to watch, um, it's anything that's kind of like I'm looking at my uh to watch list to see if there's
I had a thought recently about the selection of spotlight films that I thought would be interesting, and I just thought I'd like throw it out there and see
yeah,
if
yeah, yeah, no.
Uh-huh.
because sometimes we like because I feel like a lot of the time we like get to the end of a meeting and it's like this, we're a little over time and we have like
Yeah.
3 minutes to pick out films and then they're like become the content of the next month. Um, which has worked great. I think we've come across a lot of good films and stuff, but I think especially with
Mhm.
this, I think with this pairing that like kind of went well in an interesting way together.
Uh-huh.
Uh, I was wondering if it would be interesting to instead of like picking as a group month to month, if maybe we tried at some point, or I don't know, or just like if there was something of like each person picked both films each month and like you could
Oh,
set up a theme or a through line or just share films that you in particular want to share with the rest of the
I like
group and
that.
this like this is
that sounds
me as
fun.
well being like a wannabe programmer and like wanting to like a curatorial
Yeah,
exercise
yeah.
but
I've always felt like our spotlight films are a little bit kind of random. It's like
yeah
Yeah.
yeah
um
so
no, I
like
think that's a
we
great
like that
idea.
today obviously it'd be something that like we could decide, oh, for next month, like it could be this person's pick, and then you could have the month to think about like what you would want to share, maybe, or something like this.
Yeah.
Um,
Then do you want
if
to do that
that
then?
sounds compelling to people, I don't know.
That's appealing to me.
I think that's super compelling. Then should we do this then? Like maybe for this month, we'll just
Mhm.
kind of do the spotlight film as is. Um,
Yeah,
and then
yeah, yeah,
starting like from like after our March meeting, maybe we can, yeah, like have a more of a thematic choice of like, I think that'll be cool
yeah,
for me too because I love to, and I think those themes could be very interesting, right? It could be like for me, I'm thinking about like films that is set in New York or films that Could be very much like however you decide. So
So like, yeah, if we want to, we can just pick films like for this month. But then if you want to, like, even Andrew, if you wanted to go first, I'd be so happy to like for you to go first and pick out the movie
oh
to
yeah.
to we'll announce next
Hmm.
month.
Right, right.
So you have
Oh,
the month to think about it. So you know it's you or
yeah.
whoever. I could do it too if you know.
Yeah. Um, do you want to go first actually, Jackson? I think
Sure.
that might
Yeah,
yeah,
totally.
yeah.
No, 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 totally. I mean, I suggested it, so
Yeah, that might be nice. But yeah, how about this? And then let's say let's choose the spotlight films first.
okay.
Um, and then I'll like also include that as like next month it'll be next month's spotlight films will be curated by Jackson. Um,
Sweet. Cool. Yeah, and we'll go
but
in a little
uh-huh.
rotation.
Yeah, exactly.
Hmm.
I think I like that idea a lot. Well, yeah, maybe for this month though, let's just
Mhm.
kind of stick with the regular way that we've been doing it. Um, Also, have you guys seen this movie called Rye Lane? Rye Lane. I don't know.
Yeah, it's
Right,
Yeah,
cute.
what?
Rye Lane. I watched it and I also really liked it.
How do you spell it?
Rye
Right.
Lane. It's also very like past lives before sunrisey,
Yeah.
but a little bit more like Gen Z millennial.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's very like Gen Z.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's
Uh,
all
yeah,
right.
it's cute. It's playing very directly off of a lot of like tropes or like iconic rom-com moments that you
Hmm.
see, but kind of in an interesting way.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Interesting.
What are
You guys,
some movies that you guys are thinking of? I'm looking at my list. Um,
I mean, one thing I thought of recently of seeing that I do want to see in general is
mhm.
The Hunger by Tony Scott.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
I'm a huge fan of Tony Scott in general, and I heard someone say The Hunger was really good recently.
Hunger.
Uh, Tony Scott just has like a crazy The Hunger, yeah, yeah.
Oh, The Hunger, actually.
Oh.
Okay. Huh.
Oh, this is his debut. His debut
Uh,
was a
British film, yeah.
Oh, it's with Catherine Deneuve.
Deneuve, yeah,
Deneuve.
and David
Okay.
Bowie.
he went from this to Deja Vu.
Yeah, I know, weird, right? So I'm so curious, like, to see where the tie-in is, because I love Deja Vu. I
Yeah.
think Deja Vu is amazing.
I'm down. Yeah.
Yeah.
I this kind of reminds me a little bit of like when we watched what's that film by am I forgetting the guy who's like it's kind of also like an erotic horror film with like a guy who like is observing the woman through like the binocular, like it's set in LA. I think Young Wang was like your suggestion. Do you remember?
Guy
Oh boy.
staring at a woman with binoculars. Rear Window.
I was gonna say.
No, no, no. It's sorry, like now I think I need to find this just because it's gonna bug me if I don't. In the meantime, you guys should
Okay.
think of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, let's watch I'm down to watch The Hunger. I think that'll be good for me to Body Double.
Oh, okay, okay, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
By
yeah, yeah,
Brian De
yeah,
Palma,
yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes.
Looks like a De
Okay.
Palma film.
That's a
Yeah.
great movie.
Let's watch Hunger, Tony Scott. Um
Have we ever like discussed all that jazz?
I we
No,
haven't, but I did watch it.
Okay.
I did not.
Okay.
Um,
Phenomenal.
yeah, I would do that if but you guys saw it both. So
Yeah, I think all that jazz I might. Yeah, I feel like I would maybe prefer a different Spotlight
Yeah,
films.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
um
Um, we all seen Phantom of the Paradise, Leaving of De Palma.
Phantom of the
no.
Paradise. No.
I mean that's probably the De Palma that is like the closest
Yes, this is
to
like the
the
rock opera.
yeah, yeah.
I have heard a lot of good things about this.
This is so interesting. Okay. I mean, I feel like
Yeah,
this also thematically goes well too because
Yeah.
the thing
yeah,
is they're
yeah.
both like horror. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, if you guys are cool with it, I'm down
I'm
to
down.
watch Phantom of
I'm
the
Yeah.
down.
Paradise.
That's good.
Okay.
Phantom of the Paradise. Yeah.
And have you seen this, Youngbang?
I've seen this like I saw this like 5 years ago.
Okay, okay.
And yeah,
Cool. All right,
but
This looks dope. I'm
so
excited.
let's do this. Um, Phantom of the Paradise. Okay, and then I think in terms of our next meeting date,
mhm,
um, maybe maybe we can also aim for the last week of March.
Hmm.
Um,
mhm.
I think for me, like maybe March 27th is usually March 27th would be pretty good for me.
Oh, hold on. That's Wednesday.
Yeah.
Yeah, that should work for me.
It would probably if it's Wednesday, it'd probably have to be after like 5 p.m. in
That's
the
okay.
evening
I
Eastern
think
time.
for me it should be like that would be best for me
Yeah,
too.
Wednesday evening probably better for me
Yeah.
too.
Okay, perfect.
Evening time. So I would say maybe like just around 6, 7-ish.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and then I think by our March 27th meeting, I think Jackson, you can also kind of come with like two films around the theme, that we'd want
Mhm.
to, and I'd be happy to go after you. So like for the April
Okay.
meeting. Okay.
Yeah, sounds good.
Perfect.
Cool. I'll
Cool.
send this all out to you guys. It was great catching up. I should stop.